More than 65 years have passed since the United States staged its nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tens of thousands died in the immediate aftermath, and since then thousands more have perished from acute radiation exposure. The attack signaled the end of World War II, which killed more than 60 million people. This war cost the governments involved a fortune in more than human life. Cleaning up the mess would take decades. But in today's world, although military might and genocide still have their place in world politics, they have ceased to be the only instruments with which governments go to war. Manipulating public opinion is one of the weapons of the 21st century. In today's world, media outlets compete for public favor, using every ploy in the book to get people interested in their version of world events. And they have succeeded, making the media's portrayal of any government or system a key factor in the survival and success of that system. What the media can do, no military onslaught can achieve. In the last 3 decades since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Iran has been the target of Western propaganda. In this episode, the media war against Iran will be our topic of discussion. One way governments go about protecting their national interests and asserting their power is war. History bears witness to this. There have been numerous wars waged worldwide, leaving death and destruction in their wake, World War II being one of the most devastating. And with new technologies have come new and improved weaponry. But to achieve results and reduce the costs of war, some technology has been used to wage a new kind of war, a psychological one, aimed at manipulating people by influencing their ideas and opinions. It's the mainstream Western media that is leading this war against any government or entity that it doesn't like. We spoke to Mr. Alireza Soleimanzadeh, the head of the News and Political Programs Department at Jam Jam Television Network.
Imperialistic countries try to use the media to manipulate the way people think in the target country, to lay the foundations for an active presence in that country, or achieve their objectives indirectly.
Media wars are just as aggressive as military wars. No shots are fired and no actual deaths are caused, but the influence it has on society is immense and the effects long-lasting. Media war is a subcategory of soft war.
Soft tactics are those that send a message using friendly or peaceful means. The media is one of the most important tools used to do this. Over time, soft and military war tactics have combined. The US is one of the countries using threats and force and then justifying its actions via the media in the name of public diplomacy.
Before the Islamic Revolution, Iran was Washington's main ally in the Middle East. But after the revolution, relations broke down. Washington decided Iran was an adversary. Mr. Esrafil Ebadati is the head of Iran Labour News Agency.
After the Islamic Revolution succeeded, because the West, especially the US, felt it had been undermined, it tried to convince the world that the revolution would make life difficult for Iranians. They started using negative propaganda against the Islamic establishment and portraying us as terrorists. The West has invested heavily in this. By launching various networks and channels and paying off many media outlets, they have tried to make the international community believe the Iranian people and their leaders are terrorists.
In today's world, the media is often used to prepare the public for military warfare. The people are primed to believe military action is vital. The prelude to the Iraq War was a media frenzy in which US and British officials made very serious speeches warning of the terrible things that would no doubt befall the so-called free world if they did not attack Iraq. Baghdad was accused of having a covert nuclear weapons program. More than 1 million deaths later, no WMDs have been found in Iraq. Mr. Anbar Louis, the chief editor at the Resalat Daily, told us more about scenarios like this.
When 9/11 happened, the Americans gave themselves the right to punish two whole nations, Afghanistan and Iraq. Did the whole of these nations get up and go attack the towers? No, a few individuals did. And they were from Saudi Arabia, and they are on good terms with the Saudis. They've tried to make it look like they are the flag bearers of democracy in the Middle East. They have nothing to say about Qatar and Saudi Arabia, who don't have elections of any kind, and back them in supporting terrorism in the region.
From 2003 onwards, Iran's nuclear energy program became a controversial issue between Iran and the West. And to feed the hype against Iran and introduce the Iran threat to the world, the Western media went into overdrive. For nearly a decade, all Iran's nuclear activities have been reported with a foreboding tone and ominous predictions made about the intent behind them.
As far as nuclear power is concerned, they are trying to portray Iran as a country that defies international law and wants to acquire nuclear weapons. They try to portray us as a nation that cannot be trusted, that violates human rights, and that supports terrorism. They talk about war against Iran and try to make people think the Iranian government is a threat to its own people, and thus a threat to the international peace and security.
Western media has always lumped the whole world together, saying Iran is a nation the global community is worried about and feels threatened by. We went to the Iran Students News Agency and spoke to Mr. Sasan Hajizadeh.
Regarding Iran's right to peaceful nuclear technology, more than 140 of the non-aligned movement's member states voted in favor of Iran. But Western media still says the world is worried about Iran's nuclear issue. Is it really the world, or the West led by the US that's worried? How does this claim get so much publicity via the media? Most of the world's media is directly or indirectly controlled by the Western media mafia. The global community is led to believe that the whole world is worried about Iran's nuclear program.
Many a tourist traveling to Iran is pleasantly surprised to find Iran has all the mod cons and people are friendly. For years, Western media has portrayed Iran as a backward nation, giving Westerners a false image of Iran and its people.
They try to portray Iran as a very aggressive, irrational, and backward country. That's why those people who watch the BBC or CNN and don't travel to Iran become aware of the paradox between their claims and reality in the first few hours after arriving. For instance, there is a lot of talk about the sanctions, whereas people in Iran are living quite normally.
The top stories on Sky World News. The United States says it's foiled a major terrorist plot.
Western mainstream media has accused Iran of many things, including terrorism and funding global terrorism. In 2011, 2 Iranians were arrested and accused of plotting the assassination of the Saudi ambassador to Washington. So far, no evidence suggesting that is true has been presented to the courts, but the allegations have been repeated hundreds of times and subjected to in-depth analysis via various news outlets. Giving an issue a lot of airtime and repeating the allegations over and over is a media war strategy.
The media is using at least 30 different strategies. Repetition, for instance. Something is repeated so many times that the audience believes it to be a fact. Another strategy is denial, denying the truth. Then we have framing, which means to look at an issue from a specific angle or viewpoint. Lying is also a strategy. Then there is exaggeration.
News about Iran in Western media usually involves accusations to do with terrorism, nuclear weapons, and human rights issues. But breakthroughs and progress in Iran, if reported, are reported with an angle. When Iran announced it had acquired the expertise to produce 20% enriched uranium, Western media reported it as Iran moving one step closer to making nuclear weapons. When it sent satellites into space, it was reported as a step toward making even more sophisticated ballistic missiles.
One of their techniques is to make the audience believe they are impartial, to show some individuals or progress in a positive light to gain the people's trust. Their hidden agenda is to make people think the world is worried about the Islamic Republic's policies, and that those policies are causing problems in the region. These are all media tactics. Nothing is without an agenda or angle, even their praise. Even seemingly positive news about Iran is written with that agenda in mind.
Eastern media outlets also play a role in influencing the people of their region. How they choose to cover events can create divide between ethnic groups or religious sects. The nature of the news affects people's mindset. The dominant religion in Middle Eastern countries is Islam, and divide between its different sects is seen as an element that allows for foreign powers to muscle in on the region.
They have various policies for solving this problem. One is encouraging Islamophobia in the non-Muslim world. They had decided to use fear-mongering against Iran and Shia Muslims, their main audience being the world's Sunni population. They did this to prevent Iran's revolutionary ideologies from spreading throughout the Muslim world and to take full advantage of friction between Shia and Sunni Muslims.
Iran has many different ethnicities and has a large Sunni population. High on the agenda of some media outlets is accentuating ethnic divide in Iran. The Noor network or the Vesal network are good examples. They propagate Wahhabism and their target audience is Iran's Sunni population. Driving a wedge between ethnic groups is a tactic they use to encourage separatism. Channels like Al Arabiya add fuel to that fire, encouraging ethnic groups to demand separation.
To pursue its objective, which is to bring Iran to its knees, the first thing the West does is try to aggravate internal conflicts. Why? Because doing this costs less. If Iran and Saudi Arabia go to war, for instance, the West will support Riyadh, but in turn Riyadh will buy weapons from the US. so it makes another country foot the bill. If, for instance, the West creates friction between Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims, this will no doubt weaken the government. That's why the West tries to fuel these fires.
There are media outlets that support terrorist groups like the Mujahideen Khalq organization, Jundullah and Pajak, giving their leaders a podium and title. It's worth mentioning that the head offices of many of these groups are in the US and European countries, as are the head offices of channels like the Azadi network.
This psychological war has two targets. One is the Iranian people. They try to lower their morale and make them dissatisfied with their government's foreign policies. And the other target is the country's officials. They want to make them feel it's costing Iran too much to stand its ground and defend its peaceful nuclear energy program and support the region's freedom movements.
Media outlets that target the Iranian people use Farsi, and some of them even use different Iranian dialects. BBC Persian and Voice of America are the most important of these channels. Recently, they've been saying that the UN, US and EU sanctions leveled at Iran have brought Iran's economy to its knees and attached glitches in Iran's financial system to those sanctions. So what goals does the West pursue with its media war on Iran? One theory is that the West's problem with Iran has nothing to do with nuclear matters or terrorism, but is rooted in ideological differences.
The
West has its own ideologies that conflict with ours. They see Iran as an obstacle in the international arena. The problem is not with Iran, it's with the way Iran brings legitimacy into question. So they've targeted Iran with their media. They don't want Iran's voice to be heard, but for their own discourse to become the dominant discourse.
But what has the Islamic Republic done to counter the onslaught? One way to fight negative propaganda is for Iran to have a strong, convincing media machine itself.
We have no international media outlet that is dedicated to the ideologies of revolution. But even what is being done by channels like Al Alam and Press TV have been ill received by the West. Western governments try to stifle these voices on various pretexts. By doing so, they violate their own laws advocating the free flow of information, but they do this because they feel these channels are a threat to them. They find various excuses to close down Sahar, Press TV, Al Alam. So our biggest problem is that we don't have a major international media outlet that is dedicated to the Muslim world.
In recent years, Iran's media outlets have increased considerably. The number of radio and television channels have gone up, and so have the number of newspapers printed across the country. But how influential have they been in balancing things out?
In the media, effectiveness is key. As I said, our domestic media channels are designed for a domestic audience, but they must be able to work on an international scale as well. I don't think they've been very successful in this regard. The truth is, the role our media plays is in dire need of redefining. Our media's objectives must be made clear. Some people think the good thing about our media is that all its outlets are saying the same thing. But in actual fact, each one has to have its own mission. Each one should be a piece of the puzzle. Every media outlet must have its own theme and characteristics. Of course, all of them should be aimed at maintaining national security and our Islamic values. We have our weaknesses, but that does not mean we are in the clutches of Western media. That said, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. There are issues that have to be addressed, and we have to do some damage control.
Iran has state and private media outlets. One of the private ones is ILNA. Its head believes in order for Iranian media to become more influential, private media outlets have to increase even more, and the government should support this.
There is support, but it's very little. We are not equipped to make a different public perception on international scale. They can read our web pages on the net, but we can't get our word out. For instance, we don't have the equipment to get video and audio out to the world. Maybe the necessary infrastructure is not there, or the private sector isn't equipped for that. But government support can really help. And the impact we, as a non-governmental entity, can have on the international community is much greater.
In today's world, the global community is being bombarded with news and information from various sources: the internet, radio, television, and newspapers. But it's the audience that has to be savvy when it comes to receiving all that information and processing it.
If the audience has media literacy and is familiar with media tactics to a certain degree and is aware that no media outlet is impartial and all of them are aimed at maintaining national security and interests, they will never buy into the claims made by Western media. I think one of the media's duties is to first make sure its own people have media literacy and then educate the public about the media too.
News and political programs are not the only way to change the thought process and habits of a people. Channels like Manotor, Farsi One, Zemzeme, and many others aim to change people's lifestyle, culture, and expectations over a long-term period. These channels show sitcoms, fashion shows, soap operas, and reality shows that slowly but surely inject a society with concepts, some of which are far from reality.
At the
moment, there are more than 110 channels using Farsi that are being broadcast for Iranians from outside their borders. BBC Persian is a good example, a channel connected to Britain's Foreign Office or the Voice of America that is broadcast from the US. Or networks like Farsi One, Manoto, or Zemzeme, which belong to Rupert Murdoch's empire. These are channels that show programs in Farsi. If we compare the policies and tactics they use, most of them have some common ideologies. The most important one is that the religious establishment is not capable of running a country in the 21st century.
To fight the influx of foreign cultures that might damage Iran's own, IRIB has launched a documentary, cartoon, sports and drama channel for domestic viewers, and iFilm that shows Iranian films and sitcoms and quiz shows that can be watched in Persian or Arabic. The cultural similarities between Islamic countries has made this channel a big hit in Arab nations. Media wars and the flow of information continue unchecked. Media machines compete to rule the airwaves, and amidst all this, it's the global community sitting down to an innocent hour of TV or radio that is the target. Hundreds of TV channels, articles and images at the tips of our fingers. The hard part is finding the truth in all the commotion. More than 65 years have passed since the United States staged its nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tens of thousands died in the immediate aftermath, and since then thousands more have perished from acute radiation exposure. The attack signaled the end of World War II, which killed more than 60 million people. One way governments go about protecting their national interests and asserting their power is war. History bears witness to this. There have been numerous wars waged worldwide, leaving death and destruction in their wake, World War II being one of the most devastating. And with new technologies have come new and improved weaponry. But to achieve results and reduce the costs of war, some technology has been used to wage a new kind of war, a psychological one, aimed at manipulating people by influencing their ideas and opinions. It's the mainstream. This war cost the governments involved a fortune in more than human life. Cleaning up the mess would take decades. But in today's world, although military might and genocide still have their place in world politics, they have ceased to be the only instruments with which governments go to war. Manipulating public opinion is one of the weapons of the 21st century. In today's world, media outlets compete for public favor, using every ploy in the book to get people interested in their version of world events. In Western media that is leading this war against any government or entity that it doesn't like. We spoke to Mr. Alireza Soleimanzadeh, the head of the News and Political Programs Department at Jam Jam Television Network.
Imperialistic countries try to use the media to manipulate the way people think in the target country, to lay the foundations for an active presence in that country, or achieve their objectives indirectly.
Media wars are just as aggressive as military wars. No shots are fired and no actual deaths are caused, but the influence it has, and they have succeeded, making the media's portrayal of any government or system a key factor in the survival and success of that system. What the media can do, no military onslaught can achieve. In the last 3 decades since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Iran has been the target of Western propaganda. In this episode, the media war against Iran will be our topic of discussion.